It's the classic rock lost and found. Right here on Penn's Peak Radio.
Tonight, I'd like to welcome to the show a man who needs no introduction, Edgar Winter, who will be playing here at Penn's Peak with Rick Derringer on Saturday, February 4th. Welcome to the show, Edgar.
Hey, thank you, Matt. Are y'all ready to rock and roll?
Oh, absolutely. We can't wait to see you here.
Well, we're looking forward to it.
Edgar, you're going to be kicking off your East Coast American tour on January 27th in Ridgefield, Connecticut, wrapping it up July 7th in Sackets Harbor, Florida. What have you got planned for this tour? Are you doing anything different? Are you introducing any new material? Are you going to bring something back that you haven't played in a while? What can we expect?
Well, you'll hear everything you'd expect from Edgar Winter. We'll be doing Tobacco Road, a traditional blues song that I popularized with my brother Johnny. And that's one that I've been doing for years. And it has a long, never-ending scream at the end and the vocal guitar duel that's become one of my trademarks. We'll also be doing songs from my first band, White Trash, songs like Keep Playing That Rock and Roll, maybe Save the Planet, Turn on Your Love Light, which is an old Bobby Bland song.
Yes, I'd love to hear that.
Used to play. And, of course, from the Edgar Winter Group, the indestructible monster, Frankenstein.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Ride, which were obviously our two biggest hits. And we'll be doing songs from our most recent CD, which is Rebel Road. We'll probably be doing 3 or 4 songs from that. We usually do about a 90-minute set, and we have a big backlog of songs, so hard to tell exactly what we'll be doing. We like to alternate them. So by the time we get there, but I can guarantee you it will be a very diverse, fun-filled set. I really love my band. It's really an excellent band, and we love to jam. We love to play, and we love to to stretch out. I think that's somewhat different from some of the I guess what you would call the classic rock artists and bands that basically perform their hits, and they do them pretty much the same way as they were always done. We're a little more adventurous. We like to experiment and have fun, and I think that really communicates to the audience. So I guarantee you it'll be a cool show that you won't forget.
Okay, awesome. Are you going to be playing a little bit of everything? You're known as multi-instrumentalist, obviously. Are you going to be playing some saxophone, some keyboard, a little bit of everything?
I think that I'm generally perceived as a keyboard player, probably because of the Frankenstein image. I happen to be the first guy to get the idea of putting a strap on the keyboard.
Right.
And that became such just sort of a powerful, dynamic image that I'm associated with the keyboard, and I do love keyboard. Actually, I started out, my first instrument was ukulele. Johnny, my brother, and I started out playing ukuleles when I was just a kid, 6 years old, and then Johnny graduated to guitar. I played guitar for a minute, then switched to electric bass. Then I played drums for a while when I was like 10 or 11, and then electric pianos came out when Ray Charles did What I Say. Dun, 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 dun. I said, wow, what a cool sound.
Yeah.
I have one of those. And I had been accustomed to like playing old upright pianos where you had to put a mic in the piano and it would always feed back and you'd beat your hands black and blue and bloody, on that thing. So electric pianos were great. And then organ became really popular. And in my teens, I picked up the sax, and that really became my main instrument. And it's sort of ironic because frequently I'll do a show and people say, "Man, that was great. I didn't know you played the saxophone." And sax is my axe. That's the one that I really consider my main instrument. So in my teens, I got more interested in jazz and classical, and I think I'm generally perceived as a rock guy. And once again, because of Frankenstein, it's such a hard rock, almost a precursor of heavy metal, with some jazz influence. But I'm really thought of as a rocker, and I do love to rock. I'll be doing all of that on the show. I'll be playing, piano, organ, synthesizer, percussion with the timbali drum trade-off in Frankenstein, and alto sax, and singing.
Wow, that's going to be awesome. So here's my question. Was it challenging for you to adapt to playing the keyboard standing up and like running around the stage? How'd you do that?
It is somewhat different, but I had been so frustrated for years as a keyboard player. First of all, as I was explaining, it was just a problematical instrument in the beginning, and then even when electric pianos and organs came out, where at least you could hear what you were doing, it could be amplified. You're always in competition with electric guitar, which of course is loud and blasting. But just the restriction of being stuck behind a massive bank of keyboards was really frustrating. Nobody can see what you're doing, and you're just kind of stuck there. So when I was walking through the music store one day, this was in New York when we were living in the New York area. It was at Manny's. And I saw these new synthesizers, and there were basically like two types. There were the Moogs, which invented by Robert Moog, who was one of the pioneers of synthesizer, and the ARPs, the ARP 2600.
Yes, the Alan Perlman.
The thing about that keyboard was that it was in two pieces. It was like a console, or like the guts of the instrument, which was this cool mad scientist-looking contraption with all kinds of dials and sliders and stuff. And then the keyboard was separate, and it was a remote keyboard, attached to the master control panel or the console or whatever you want to refer to it as, with this big snaky umbilical cord. And the keyboard was pretty lightweight, and I looked at it and said, wow, looks like you could just put a strap on that thing and pick it up and play it like a guitar, which was exactly what I proceeded to do. And, as they say, the rest is history. And yeah, it was a little different physically, but not very much. Not very much. Most of the people that started using a keyboard, they became referred to as keytars because they kind of it reminded people of playing a guitar, and a lot of those were pretty toy-like, and they had very short range of keyboard, and people would just use them mostly for solos. But I like to play full keyboard parts, and I used to strap on this full-length Univox keyboard that was like 40 pounds at least. That was pretty back-breaking, and that was physically demanding to do. I became used to it, but it's just so much more fun to play that way. It was very liberating.
The ARP 2600, like you mentioned before, obviously used in Frankenstein. I read that it was also used to create the voice for R2-D2 in Star Wars, also used by like hundreds of incredible artists, including Stevie Wonder, Herbie Hancock, even Nine Inch Nails occasionally. Are you still playing the ARP 2600? Are you still find yourself experimenting with it?
I have a couple of them, and I do use them in the studio occasionally. They're really great, though, for, as you mentioned, the R2-D2. They're great at sci-fi sounds, and that was another major difference. What I was doing, I've been variously acclaimed and accused of ushering in the whole era of the synthesizer, and and in the 70s, synthesizer was very controversial and kind of got a bad rap in that I think it was perceived as, in a lot of cases, dehumanizing music, and there were a lot of people were using synthesizers to emulate the sounds of already existing instruments, like to be a string section or a horn section.
Yeah.
And they were putting other live musicians out of work, in the process of doing that. And then there were a lot of people that were using synthesizers. They would create dumb loops, and in a lot of cases, people with very little musical talent were just using synthesizers, more as a construction tool and to generate music that they were incapable of playing, if you understand what I'm saying. They were just not really accomplished musicians, but they were interested in synthesizer, and some of that music was really interesting. And writers don't necessarily have to. You can be very imaginative as a writer, not necessarily a player. But the point that I'm making is that my whole approach to synthesizer was not to use it, to create already existing sounds,
Oh,
but
clearly.
as as a platform to try to create new, never before heard sounds. And I loved all the old synth, like all the film scores, like where they use theremin and synth, like in Forbidden Planet, and a lot of the old sci-fi movies, and that was sort of my inspiration, and that's really what I was more about. And I really believe that synthesizer is one of the most human instruments. If you compare it, say, to a piano is all rods and hammers. It's pretty much reminiscent of the Industrial Revolution. It's a machine. All you can do is strike a key, and you've got a note, and you've got a sustain pedal, and that's it. With a synthesizer, you can change the timbre, that you can, the general, like the whole tone, with different oscillators. You can make it sound like virtually anything. Then you can introduce all kinds of modulations, pitch bend, like a growl or a vibrato, and that flexibility, to me, makes it a lot more human. Just because it's boundless. It really, whatever you could imagine, you can create. So I've always thought it's like a computer, garbage in, garbage out. If you put love and care and time into what you do with a synthesizer, you'll get that out of it. So I've always, been a proponent of synthesizer, and tried to defend it, from that time. Now, of course, synthesizers they're ever present. They're pretty much everywhere you look.
Everyone has a story of how they got into music, maybe a certain musician or band that inspired them. Or, you said that you started playing out the ukulele. When did you discover your love and passion for music? When did you decide that this is something that you might want to do for the rest of your life?
Actually, it was later. I always knew that music would be a part of my life. It was just something that was always there for me from a very early age. And my brother Johnny and I started out playing ukulele, singing Everly Brothers songs, and we won local talent contests. We went on the radio show, the Uncle Willie Show, when I was only 4 years old.
Wow!
And that my mother tells me. I don't remember. I remember going on it when I was 6, but so I started very early, and my dad played guitar and banjo. He played alto sax in a swing band in his youth, and he had a barbershop quartet that would come over to the house and sing. He sang in the choir. And my mother played beautiful classical piano, but they weren't professional musicians, but very musical. My dad played fiddle. My granddad played fiddle, and my great-grandfather played trumpet. Everybody in our family played music. My brother Johnny, he was very ambitious, and it was really his dream. He used to read all the fan magazines. He was Johnny Cool Daddy Winter with the shades and the guitar, and he watched Bandstand, and it was his dream. I was more like the weird kid that played all the instruments. And I think for me, the turning point was when I played Woodstock with my brother Johnny. And, up to that point, I'd been sort of a serious musician. I don't know. Had it not been for Johnny's success, I might have been a jazz player, or I might have been an engineer, or gone in some completely different direction. After Johnny's huge success, there was an article in Rolling Stone, and he was really proclaimed the new hot flash Texas guitar slinger, and he invited me to play on his first few albums, and I came up to New York and met his manager, Steve Paul, who introduced me to Clive Davis, who at that time was the president of CBS, and Clive offered me, much to my surprise, offered me my own record deal, and I said, oh, hey, why not? But I still wasn't really thinking of it as a career. It was all a matter of happenstance and just something that I wasn't really fully oriented. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But when I played Woodstock, that really changed my whole life. It changed my point of view. And I'll never forget that moment. The whole thing was, set, against the backdrop of civil rights and the peace movement. And, there were people that were writing and singing songs that they really believed in. When I was on that stage, just looking out over this endless sea of humanity and seeing all these people united and brought together in such a unique way, it made me realize that music was a lot more than just entertainment. And I had just loved music as a kid, and I was just immersed in that world. It was a very personal and private thing to me. It was almost like my little escape world. And when I saw Woodstock and realized how it could actually transcend those boundaries and reach out and bring people together, that's when I decided, I'm going to be a writer. It changed my focus, and from music being more of an introverted thing to being an extroverted, reaching out to see how I could use it to affect changes and hopefully, make the world a better place. So I think that was a real awakening for me.
Yeah, like you were saying before, when you got your first record deal, 1970, appropriately titled Entrance. You had your brother Johnny joining you on guitar, like you said, and you had Tommy Shannon, who later became known for his work with Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. What was it like working with your brother for so many years?
I loved working with Johnny, and there was a point where we hadn't played together in 20 years or so, but lately we've been doing shows together, and he was my all-time musical hero, and we grew up playing together, and I'm often asked, well, was there sibling rivalry? And not really, because, as I said, I was content. Johnny was always the band leader. I liked just being more behind the scenes and like working up the arrangements. And, I just loved music in and of itself. I loved the beauty of harmony and rhythm, so forth. And so it was never a competitive thing. I was never trying to outdo Johnny. We had very different styles. Johnny loved old traditional blues and like the acoustic, more country blues that people like Muddy Waters, Lightning Hopkins, Howlin' Wolf, and I liked more of the more sophisticated urban blues guys like B.B. King and Ray Charles and Bobby Blue Bland, and then got more into jazz. But we still stay in touch. It's harder now. I'm on the West Coast, and Johnny's in Connecticut. When we were still in New York, we were on Park Avenue, my wife Monique and I, and Johnny was on 85th. We could just walk over there. It was only like six or eight blocks. But now we cross paths on the road. We did a blues cruise together where I was just a guest on that and got to sit in and play with Johnny's band. And we just did a Legends cruise a few months ago, which was really a lot of fun. That had ZZ Top and Marshall Tucker and Blackfoot and Johnny and our band. Probably about 15 bands, but it was really a lot of fun. So, we still play on one another's records. I played on Johnny's last CD, which is either coming out or just released, and he played on my last when he played on Rockin' the Blues, which was a song that I wrote especially with him in mind. So, it's very, very emotional, and I love every opportunity that arises. When we play together, I always go up and jam, and we still have a great time with it.
Yeah, I got the opportunity to see Johnny, I think 2 years ago here at Penn's Peak, and it was one hell of a show. I mean, he just knows how to pack the place and keep people going. Yeah, it was a great gig. I want to touch a little bit about Rick Derringer here. He's going to be joining you for your gig here at Penn's Peak. Here's where I'm confused. Is he going to be an opening act, or is he going to be joining you on stage for the show?
No, we're playing both with our respective bands.
Okay.
So Rick has had his band for years, and I've had mine. But I always invite Rick up at the end of our set, if he's still around, depending on his schedule. But I usually invite him to play on Tobacco Road and Free Ride, like toward the end of our set. I did want to make that clear for everybody. Rick will be doing, all of his songs with his own band, and I'll be doing all of my songs with my own band, and then hopefully we'll get a chance to do some stuff stuff together. But Rick always has a standing invitation to play, to sit in whenever we do shows together. That's what's going on there.
Good. I can't wait for that. Ironically, for being such a groundbreaking hard rock guitar player like Rick, he made his musical breakthrough through the McCoys with their hit "Hang On Sloopy." How did you meet Rick, and how would you say his influence shifted the Edgar Winter Group's direction?
I met Rick at a club that he was playing with the McCoys called the Club Tarot in New York, and Johnny's and my manager Steve was familiar with and aware of the McCoys. The McCoys, Steve had a club in New York, very famous club called The Scene, and everybody in the world played at The Scene. I mean, literally, you could see Beatles, Stones, Elton John, Joe Cocker, just anybody that you can think of. The Rascals was kind of like one of the house bands. And the McCoys played there a lot. I saw Johnny jam with Jimi Hendrix there. Anyway, Steve said, "Oh, let's go out and see the McCoys." And I, of course, had been familiar with "Hang On Sloopy." Johnny and I had played it. When it came out, the McCoys were really young. I was blown away. I didn't realize what a great guitarist Rick was. I felt an immediate musical kinship, even though he comes from a completely different part of the country. He's, from the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana. He obviously had listened to old blues stuff, or a lot of it, and back at, in that time, artists, like the common prevailing wisdom, artists weren't supposed to produce themselves, and the record companies really wanted an artist, to have a producer. They wanted an independent, objective ear. And of course, I didn't want some fat guy with a cigar,
Yeah.
telling me what to play. So I said, well, if I'm going to have a producer, I want to have somebody that understands the music. And Rick seemed like, the perfect choice. So I engaged Rick as a producer, and he produced the first White Trash records, and they only come out at night. He ended up playing in White Trash after the original guitarist Floyd Radford, and he ended up playing in the Edgar Winter Group after Ronnie Montrose, the original guitarist, in that group. So we have a long musical history, and Rick is a very versatile player. It's one of the things that I like about working with Rick. He's got blues roots. Great country picker. He understands all alternate tuning stuff. He can play jazz. He knows advanced theory, and that makes him really fun to work with. Ronnie Montrose, on the other hand, the thing that I loved about Ronnie was he just rocked. I mean, he was very unpredictable. Rick was a very controlled player, but I'll always think of Ronnie as the guitar player, in the Edgar Winter Group. But Rick and I have stayed in touch over the years, and just like Johnny and I, we play on one another's recordings. We tour together. We probably do, 20 or so shows a year together. We were just in the Ringo and the All-Star Band together, which was really a lot of fun because we usually play with our separate groups, and it was great to get to play in the same band with Rick. And thanks to Ringo, we had that opportunity. So we'll always, Rick, Johnny, and I are sort of it's a musical family that is not going to be broken up.
Right. For all those years playing with Rick and Johnny and everybody else, what's the most unusual place that you've played a show, made a recording? And how did that affect the show or the recording?
The most unusual place.
Yeah.
That's a good one. There is no one. Playing the Apollo. When I had White Trash, we were white kids playing black music, and as a kid I would listen to James Brown and the Famous Flames live from the Apollo Theater, and I never dreamed that I would get to play the Apollo, and that was one of the strangest nights because our record sounded so black. A lot of people thought that we were black.
Really?
You know? And, you know, hey, that ain't a good winner. I want my money back, you know. And, you know, I'll never forget that. When we walked out on stage, it was very strange. People didn't know what to make of us. But, you know, once we started playing, they went crazy. But it was pretty terrifying in the beginning. And, you know, the Apollo, like, if they don't like you, they'll give you the hook.
No remorse.
That was really a cool one. Woodstock, I've already mentioned.
Yeah.
I remember one night that was really like I was playing at this club. I was doing some solo piano things for a while. I wanted to just sit down and play the piano, and there was a power failure, and they just lit a bunch of candles, and there was a whole bunch of people just sitting around the piano, and I said, this is cool. This is like the old days. It kind of reminded me of, primitive, like people around the campfire. That's one that stands out in my mind. But, you know, there have been hundreds of memorable gigs over the years.
So you've got 2 more weeks before you kick off your tour. What do you find yourself doing during the time that you're not on tour?
Well, I'm constantly writing. I've been writing a lot of short stories and poetry lately. I'm maybe going to combine some of those into a book. Some of the stories are sort of fantasy, revolve around. They're about the Shadowlands, and then there's a sort of a mythical fantasy world, and then there's some music that I have called Shadow Dance that is sort of a score to that, and that's one thing that I'm working on. I've got a Broadway musical comedy version of Frankenstein that I'm working on. And, you know, I love to read, love to write, spending time with my wife, Monique. We've been married now 33 years, 34 coming up.
Awesome.
This March. Life is beautiful, you know, very fun and rewarding, and, you know, I feel like at a great time. I'm thankful to have gone through all the craziness of rock and roll, and to still be alive and well and still rocking.
Great. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell the listeners and the fans? Anything else that you'd like to plug?
Well, no, I'd just like to thank all my fans out there for their continued support, for following my career as well as that of my brother Johnny's and Rick's throughout all of these years. And, you know, it means the world to me to be able to do what I most love and see you all out there having a great time. So, you know, I couldn't do it without you, and I love you all, and I hope our paths will cross again sometime soon, and all I can say is, keep on rocking!
All right, that's what we love to hear here at Penn Speak Radio. Edgar Winter, man, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. We can't wait to see you here.
You're welcome, Matt. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, we can't wait to see you here at Penn Speak, and you can expect to see me there front row wearing my Penn Speak Radio shirt.
I was just going to ask, are you coming out yourself? And if so, be sure and stop by and say hello. So I'm glad you'll be out there. All right, I think you'll really enjoy the show. It's a cool one. We'll see you there.
Sounds good.
Crank the volume and rock out as we play forgotten songs of the 60s and 70s right here on Classic Rock Lost and Found.